CM 365, all about Carnatic music.
Experimentation is very important in every aspect of our life. Experimentation makes us to explore new things and leads us to new paths. In Carnatic music, we see that this experimentation from time to time is what that has kept the whole art itself dynamic and alive. Now, if you were to follow only a particular tradition as laid down, say about 300 years or 500 years back, and still want to continue it the same way without altering anything, I'm sure the art would have become totally stagnant and there would have been no more takers for it. So this constant experimentation, this constant innovation, rethinking how to bring about changes in the system is very, very important in terms of taking across the music itself to the public and keeping their interest, sustained. That is very important. Coming to what kind of experimentations are approved by the art community, what kind of experimentations are shunned and not acceptable by the community. This is again a very, very tricky question. For this, actually, there's no concrete answer, I would say. Because of the fact that, for example, if you take a concert format from few hundred years, that is from the time of Ariyakudi, we could say that the concert format, generally the way we sit or the way the concert artists are arranged is like the vocalist sitting in the middle and then the violin on the left, the mridangam on the right, and then the ghatam and so on. And these are typically also the instruments that are used in a Carnatic concert, they are part of the concert. But of late we see that the mridangam, ghatam, all this, the violin, they are being replaced by keyboard, then the guitar, then the drums and so on. Now, if you look at whether this experimentation is actually valid or whether it really should get approval, I would say that the traditionalists will vehemently revolt against this and say that what nonsense is this? Carnatic music should be only sung with the accompaniment of violin, mridangam, ghatam, etc. These kind of instruments like the drums and the keyboard, they are really spoiling the whole aesthetics of the system and creating more noise, and therefore they should not be allowed to be a part of the Carnatic system. But interestingly, as a contrast, I would say that this kind of system of having these drums and other accompaniments seems to be a very trendy kind of an experimentation by the younger generation. And they are drawn to Carnatic music, I would say, because of the fact that this kind of a setup is there for Carnatic music, and this experimentation actually has led to the Carnatic music being reached out to the larger masses. More people are coming to the fold of music because of the fact that these kind of other instruments there, for Western instruments, are being used to as part of the Carnatic music system. So this experimentation actually can have, it's like the two sides of the coin, where the traditional people will definitely revolt against this and say that these are things which are spoiling the complete system itself. Whereas you see that the younger generation feel attracted towards the system because of the experimentations that are being carried on. So these are always there in it. Now let us look at some more kind of experimentations that have happened. And I suppose these are all very important experimentations in terms of keeping the art moving, to bring in more takers for it. We really need it. One aspect is the raga. When we look at the treatises, we see that earlier, actually there were only 19 ragas supposed to have been in existence, and then the 72 ragas came into existence. After that, simultaneously, we also see the Janya ragas, the offsprings coming from this. And the Janaka ragas, though, are 72 and constant. The Janya ragas are infinite. Tyagarajar has created some such ragas, Dikshadhar created, but it is actually inexhaustible. And so after that, many composers who came after that also have tried to create new ragas. So this creating new ragas again is like creating new colors, different shades beautiful shades are being created by each one. Probably first when Tyagaraja himself created these new ragas, there must have been some kind of revolt, in the sense that in contrary to the Rakti ragas like Sahana, Riti Gola and other things, the smaller ragas that he created may not have offered that kind of a scope. But nevertheless, they did bring in a different color to the whole system itself. Also, I remember very distinctly about how the Lakshya Lakshana concept, where when we are doing my graduation, we used to have Professor P. Sambamurthy's books as our syllabus, guidance for the syllabus, where he has clearly mentioned that a raga, that is raga, in order to be accepted as a, ragam has to be having at least minimum of 5 notes. Then only it can be called a ragam. Any scale for that matter should have 5 notes. So this was the norm at that time, and we always believed that if there are at least only 5 notes only, then it can become a raga. But then we see that after that Dr. Balamurali Krishna broke this myth, and with 3 notes he created ragams. Now it was not just a scale, he created a ragam, he created a beautiful composition also in that, to prove that with 3 notes you can have a ragam. So this experimentation is what actually led him to think about this. Probably at the first it was kind of very new, and people were wondering how this is going to really take shape. But now we see that because of the aesthetics that it has projected, even in these 3 notes, we have come to accept this experimentation. Coming to the next aspect of the North Indian ragas, these were also actually never there in our system, but now we have absorbed so many and adopted so many North Indian ragas, because of the fact that, again, in the experimentation process we found that they have a different color. So Kacheri is nothing but offering different colors, hues and colors, different moods to the rasikas. So this bringing in of North Indian ragas in the fag and in tukadas brought in a different aesthetic color, and that's why we see that now so many of them have been adopted into our system. And in this, of course, we could also make a mention of Dikshidhar, who did take these ragams like Dwajavanti or Yamuna Kalyani, but he also intelligently Carnaticized them, I would say. He actually experimented so beautifully that he did not just take it or grab it from the north and just put it verbatim in his composition, but he tried to think of it in terms of the Carnatic music system and beautifully evolved it. So that is also very, very important. So that is why this experimentation actually proved very successful. And also we see that for another example I could give you are the many of the tillanas composed by Sri Lalgudi Jayaraman in North Indian ragas like Mand, Pilu, Madhuvanti, all these ragams which are typically North Indian ragas, but then he absorbed them so beautifully and created wonderful compositions for us. So this experimentation again proved to be really very successful, and it has caught on well with people. Coming to the Veena as accompaniment, we knew that in earlier times it was only the Veena which was accompanied vocal concerts in the courts of kings and other things. But when the violin came into the field, I suppose many would have thought this is a Western instrument and is not at all compatible to our music. But through constant experimentation, we see that many musicians have really taken the violin and seen what are the ways in which it could be modified in terms of the sitting posture, technique and other things, so that it could be suitably adapted to our Carnatic music. And today we see that after so much of experimentation by all the stalwart musicians, the violin has come to become the most successful and most compatible and most dynamic instrument as far as Carnatic music is concerned, because it can produce all the things that are there in vocal music, that can be produced very effectively on the violin. Then coming to the format, in that also we see a lot of experimentation has been done, in the sense that at one time we had a format of starting with the Varnam, then Pulya Kirtane, then a small Kritis, then a small Alapana as what we call as a sub-main item, then main item, Tukadas and other things. Today there are so many experimentations being done, like for example you may have just a Ragam Tanam Pallavi concert, or you may have a concert by a single composer, or a concert in a single Ragam. So many such experimentations are being done, and this is definitely being welcomed by the audience, because we are also sometimes bored by the monotonous kind of formats. So for a change, Having such experimentations are definitely welcome by the audience because they are able to see different dimensions and colors of Carnatic music, from what they have already been seeing. So this is very refreshing for them also. And coming to the forms that are there in the music itself, we see that earlier only the kritis of the great composers like Tyagaraja, Dikshidhar, the kind of very rakti kind of compositions were part of the kacheri. Slowly we see that when the Carnatic music was thrown open to the masses because they became a part of the Sabha culture, more kind of common audience started coming. So to please them, the Tukada section started absorbing genres from other genres also, like you see Kavadi, Chinde, then the Padam, the Javali, then the Ashtabadi, Tarangam. The Ashtabadi, Tarangam and all, were part of the Bhajana tradition only. And also the North Indian genres like Abang, Bhajan, which are all typically only the North Indian formats. They seem to be very appealing, at the fag end. So as an experimentation, what happened is that these Abang, Bhajan and all, they were included by some prominent musicians into our Carnatic music itself. So probably when they thought of introducing this as part of the Carnatic music, they would have themselves been wondering whether it will be successful or not. It was just a experimentation that they tried out. But this experimentation actually proved very, very successful in the sense that now so many musicians have started singing abangs and bhajans as part of the Carnatic music concept. And as far as the seating position is concerned, as I mentioned earlier also, the mridangam, violin, they all have their respective positions in the concert, when they sit on stage. There has also been some experimentations done thinking that the other methods of seating arrangement would be probably better, like some musicians not having the violin to the left of their side but keeping them beside them and making them play the violin. So for them this is a comfort zone. Probably they feel that from the musical point of view this is better, and the whole aesthetics of the system itself improves because of this experimentation. And in this process what happens is that the mridangam is to the right and the Upapakwadyam, the Ganjira or the Ghatam, to the left. So the traditional format which has been followed for so many years have been experimented also by musicians to see whether it could lead to some betterment, with the slight changes of position of the artist on stage could lead to a betterment of the aesthetics of the system itself. Thus we see that experimentation, this I could keep going on and on because we say that we have something called a tradition, but we must understand that this tradition is also subject to constant experimentation by musicians, music scholars, so that what happens is that the aesthetics gets improved each time. Of course, in this experimentation, not all of them are successful. It's again the concept of the survival of the fittest and survival of that which appeals to the masses. So some experimentations, they do not stand the test of time and may go off into oblivion. There are certain experimentations which have, become very successful, and they are carried forward by musicians so that it becomes, accepted by the Rasikas. In whatever way it is, we must understand that experimentation is very, very important to art in order to keep it flowing, in order to keep it dynamic and active through the ages.
CM 365, all about Carnatic music.